You've probably let something inside your walls today. Not a wooden horse. Something smaller. A message that felt too convincing to question. A deal that seemed too good to walk away from. A person who said exactly what you needed to hear at exactly the right moment. You didn't see it as a trick. That's the whole point. Because 3,000 years ago, an entire city made the same mistake, and the story we tell about it is wrong. For 10 years, the Greeks camped outside the walls of Troy. Spears failed. Sieges failed. Bronze failed. And then, according to legend, they built a horse, hid inside it, and walked straight through gates that had held for a decade of open war. Here's the part that gets lost. The horse didn't break down the wall. The Trojans opened it themselves. That single detail changes everything about what this story actually is. It isn't a war story. It's a psychology experiment, 3,000 years old, and you are still failing it. Think about what it takes to convince a city under siege to drag a stranger's gift through its own gates. Not force, persuasion. The Greeks didn't win with weapons. They won by understanding something about the human mind that researchers wouldn't formally name until thousands of years later. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying why people say yes to things they should refuse. One of his core findings was something he called social proof. The shortcut your brain uses when it sees other people accepting something and assumes it must be safe. Priests told the Trojans it was safe. Soldiers agreed. A crowd formed around a gift, and one by one, doubt collapsed into consensus. You do this too. You just don't call it a horse. You've trusted a review because 1,000 strangers already had. You've believed a claim because everyone around you seemed to. Somewhere in your evolutionary past, that instinct kept you alive. If the group ran, you ran. If the group trusted, you trusted. There was rarely time to check. But there was one man in Troy who checked. His name was Laocoon, a priest, and he warned his people not to trust it. He is remembered for a single line that survived the retelling for 30 centuries. Beware of gifts, even when the giver seems generous. Nobody listened. And that's the second part of the trick. It wasn't only that the horse looked harmless, it was that believing it was harmless felt better than the alternative. 10 years of war, 10 years of loss. And suddenly, an ending that required nothing more than opening a gate. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent his career mapping the difference between how your brain thinks it decides things and how it actually does. One of his central discoveries was this: when a conclusion is exhausting to accept and another explanation offers relief, your mind will often reach for relief first and build the reasoning afterward. The Trojans weren't stupid. They were tired. And tired minds reach for the story that lets them stop fighting. You know this feeling. The message that tells you the diagnosis probably isn't serious. The offer that says the risk is smaller than it looks. The version of events where you didn't do anything wrong. None of these are stupidity. They're relief, wearing the mask of logic. So the horse got pulled inside. And that night, while the city slept off its own celebration, soldiers climbed out from inside the wood and opened the gates from within. Here's the detail almost nobody focuses on. The war wasn't won by force breaking through a barrier. It was won by trust. Breaking a barrier from the inside, a barrier that had held for 10 years against every weapon thrown at it. That should terrify you a little. Walls stop force. Nothing stops trust once it's already inside. Modern researchers have run versions of this same test without horses or cities. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch asked people to answer a painfully simple question: Which of 3 lines matched a fourth? While seated in a room full of actors instructed to give the wrong answer out loud. And again, real participants abandoned the evidence in front of their own eyes just to match what the group had already agreed on. They weren't blind. They were social. Being wrong with everyone felt safer than being right alone. That's what happened at the gates of Troy on a smaller scale first. Not everyone believed the horse was safe, but enough people said it loudly enough, and doubt became a minority position. And nobody wants to be the only person still afraid of a gift. You've felt that exact pressure. In a meeting where you didn't raise your hand. In a group chat where you agreed just to keep things moving. In a decision you now regret because everyone else seemed so sure. The Trojans weren't a uniquely gullible civilization. They were a normal one, tired from war, hungry for resolution, surrounded by other people who seemed convinced. Every ingredient that fooled them still exists, running quietly in the background of your own decisions. So what actually got the Greeks through the wall? Not craftsmanship, not the wood, or the wheels, or the hollow belly built to hide soldiers. It was the story wrapped around the object. A gift, an apology, an ending to something exhausting. The object was never the weapon. The story was the weapon. It always is. And this is where the ancient myth stops being ancient. Every convincing lie you've ever accepted arrived wearing a story you wanted to be true. Every scam that worked on someone smart worked because it offered relief disguised as reason. Every bad decision that felt right in the moment felt right because your tired mind reached for the version that let it rest. You're not less vigilant than the people of Troy. You're running the exact same hardware. 10,000 years of evolution built a brain that trusts groups, seeks relief, and rewards stories that end the fighting. That hardware kept your ancestors alive far more often than it failed them. But it was never designed to filter modern gifts, moving at modern speed, from every direction at once. So the next time something arrives that feels too convenient, too well-timed, too exactly what you needed to hear, pause before you open the gate. Ask what Laocoon asked, out loud, while everyone around him kept walking toward the horse. Because somewhere, right now, something is standing outside your walls. It looks harmless. It might even look like a gift. And the only question that has ever mattered is the one nobody in Troy stopped to answer. What did you let inside today, and who convinced you it was safe?